Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. For those of you I have maybe not met in person yet, I'm Holly Carrotnudo, Grant and Program Manager at Horizon. Today, we are hosting an educational event for our members to better understand the legislative system and increase advocacy skills. At Horizon, we are dedicated to uplifting the status of for all women and girls. Currently, we continue to focus on financial empowerment, and specifically for this year, we're focusing on reproductive justice, housing insecurity, and affordable childcare. With the midterm elections less than a week away, I wrote a month, no, it's a week away. I would like to share that we do have some materials from the League of Women Voters. So if anyone's interested in stopping by the office and picking those up, they have a really great bipartisan guide that you can go through. It has all of the different information on each of the ballots on there. So please reach out to me if you want to stop by and pick one of those up. Today, we'll be joined by two current elected officials who represent Palm Beach County here locally and at the state level. Both have diverse experience within the legislative system. We hope to keep this event conversational, but you can raise your hand if you want to ask a question, or you can use the chat box. This event is being recorded so that we can share it with our members who were unable to attend today. Before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone that we are celebrating our 20th year here in Palm Beach County, and we are kicking off the 20th anniversary campaign next Wednesday at Panache in Ibis. Tickets are available by visiting our calendar on our website, joinhorizon.org. Now I'm going to move over and welcome Representative Emily Slosberg-King, who is a proud Florida native and lifelong resident of Palm Beach County. She graduated from FAU and from Nova Shepherd Ford College of Law. As a teenager, Emily survived a horrific car crash that claimed the life of her twin sister, Dory, and the lives of 4 others. Since then, Emily has worked tirelessly to improve traffic safety in Florida. She was elected to the Florida House of Representatives in 2016 and subsequently reelected in 2018 and 2020. She represents House District 91, which encompasses parts of Delray Beach, Boca Raton, and Boynton Beach. As a dedicated public servant, she has devoted her career to improving traffic safety by passing hands-free texting while driving and school bus safety laws, passed crime victim-based laws, and annually pursues senior and mental health appropriations for her district. Emily is an attorney and an active participant in Palm Beach County to include local Democratic clubs, League of Women Voters, National Organization of Women, Women's Legislative Caucus, and the Jewish Legislative Caucus. Emily is not running for re-election in 2022 because she has a new job about which she is over the moon. She just gave birth to her daughter, Dory, and I'm so disappointed because if we were doing this in person, we were all going to get to meet Dory. And she's raising Dory with her husband, Stephen King, a reporter anchor for the ABC TV station in West Palm Beach. So Representative Slosberg-King, we welcome you today. This is very informal and conversational, but I know, as we've stated in your bio, you have a ton of experience in the legislative system here in Palm Beach County, and our members have asked for this ongoing to hear more about the legislative system and how they can advocate for things that they believe in. So I will hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you so much. And thank you, Holly. Thank you for having me here. It's truly an honor and a privilege. As many of you know, and as Holly just said, I'm not seeking re-election. I am going to focus on my baby Dory. And with that said, I do have to do a little introduction to Dory really quickly here, because she might make other appearances. So for everybody, this is my, let's see if we can see her here, my little one, Dory. Hi, say hi, Dory. Is he happy? Is he happy, baby? Say hello.
So cute.
Thank you. Yeah, she is just learning to roll over this week, so it's a big week for Dory. Okay, and as many of you, as Holly didn't say, I'm the co-chair of the Jewish Legislative Caucus, and I am the chair of the vice chair of the Women's Legislative Caucus. So many Jewish women's issues are very near and dear to my heart, and thank you, Horizon, for doing everything that you're doing. I'm also very privileged to be sharing the stage today with Commissioner Melissa McKinlay. She's done so much for our community day in and day out, and I admire her passion for helping Palm Beach County residents. I'm going to begin by telling you my story and how I got into politics. We all get in for different reasons. And I grew up here in Palm Beach County, and I was lucky enough to have a twin sister named Dory and an older sister named Wendy, and just a normal family. And when I was 14, when we were 14 years old, you know, I was very lucky. I shared a bedroom with my twin sister. I shared clothes. I shared everything. We were together all the time. And one day, my twin sister and 5 of our friends were at the bowling alley, and we decided to take a ride with a 17-year-old. We were 14. And the 17-year-old, him and his friend got in the front seat of the car and they put their seatbelts on, and they put 7 of us in the back seat of the car and started driving at speeds of over 90 miles an hour down here in Boca Raton. And the driver just was swerving in and out of traffic, and he almost got into an accident. And instead of slowing down, the driver decided to speed up, and he sped up, lost control of the car, and went head on into another car. And as a result, the 7 of us in the back seat all flew out the back windshield. The next thing I remember is waking up in the trauma unit at Delray Hospital, and I had trees in my hair. I was on a respirator. I had a punctured lung. I had broken ribs. I had a broken pelvis. And it was just, and I didn't see my twin sister visiting me. And I remember I couldn't speak. So I had visitors coming into this hospital, my hospital room, and I would write on their hand, "Where's Dory?" And like I wrote on my grandpa's hand, "Where's Dory?" I wrote on my friend's hand, "Where's Dory?" And then I write on my father's hand, "Where's Dory?" And finally, my father, who's for the first time at a loss for words, he comes into the room and he hands me the newspaper. So I read in the Sun Sentinel that my twin sister was dead, and that my friends were dead, and that I was in critical condition and I had broken and fractured legs. And you know, I'm lucky I was on a respirator at that time, because I don't think I would have been able to breathe. It was a very difficult time. And said to my father, you know, how do we go on? How do we get through this? How do we get over this loss? And he says to me, "Emily, it's what we do after a tragedy that determines whether it remains just a tragedy. We're going to do everything we can to make sure others don't go through what we're going through." And, you know, I looked at him and he's like, we're gonna work together. We started a traffic safety foundation called the Dory Slosberg Foundation. And this was back in 1996. And he ran for office in 1999. And he ran and he became a state representative, and he passed primary enforcement of the seatbelt law. I went on to go to, you know, to graduate high school, graduate college, graduate law school. And then I ran for state House of Representatives. And of course, my main focus was traffic safety. I just figured I was just so focused on getting traffic safety legislation passed. And at the time when I ran, almost every other state in the United States had legislation making texting while driving a primary offense. And this is a big issue. I mean, everyone, especially for our youngsters, like the young people who are just learning to drive, they can't text and drive. It's completely dangerous. It was, and everybody was doing it. So what I did was I went to leadership in 2000. I got elected in 2016. I went to leadership, and I, you know, told the first thing you do when you try to get legislation passed is you speak to the Speaker of the House and you say, this is my priority. This is what I want passed. What are my chances? How should I do it? And the first year, you know, he said, you know, these are, you know, he's like, basically, they told me to make noise. Make as much noise as possible. Go around, make noise. So that's what I did. My first year, 2016, 2017, I made noise by, what I did was I filed legislation trying to make texting while driving a primary offense. I filed it as local bills. I filed it as amendments. I filed it as on committee bills. I did that just so that people would listen to my story and listen to how important I thought that texting while driving was. Because they weren't called, like usually what you do is when you're in the House of Representatives, they give you 6 bill slots, and you have to ask the chair to put the bill on the committee agenda. And if you don't get it on the committee agenda, it's never going to be heard. It's dead. So I started filing it as amendments everywhere I could, even though I really wasn't supposed to. I just kept doing it, trying to make noise. The next thing I did was I got volunteers to my office. I had volunteers come to my office, and there's 67 counties in the state of Florida, and we put each county name up in the office. And I had volunteers call each county commission, and also cities and city commissions, and ask if we could get onto their agenda so they could pass a resolution supporting a ban on texting while driving. And I did this so that we could talk about it in as many parts of the state as possible. And because the Florida legislature predominantly Republican. It's a very heavily Republican. We focused in on the Republican counties because I wanted to make sure that we had support in those Republican areas. And I just remember like every day we just started like pounding away, calling these county commissions and these city commissions and just starting off with the Republican areas. And I'll never forget one day traveling to in Northwest Florida to a Republican county that was really, it was a male dominated Republican county. So it was a lot of Republican males. And I remember one of them saying to me, like, so you're a female Democrat in this House of Representatives, and you think that this is going to pass? And I'm like, I don't know if it's going to pass, but I'm sure I'm going to keep trying, and I'm going to keep trying, and I'm going to keep trying, and I'm going to try until that's all I could do. So I remember I did get it passed in that county. We got it passed in, there's 67 counties. I think we got it passed in about 25 counties and maybe 20 some cities. And what I did was I just kept bringing these resolutions to the chair of the first committee, of the traffic safety committee. And I just kept dumping the resolutions on his desk. Like I sit in front of him, like, I got more resolutions. I got more resolutions, because after a while he couldn't give me like reasons to block the bill. He has to tell me his objections. And I'm just like, I'm getting more support. Here are your areas of support. So finally, they start, I think this was 2018, they start taking it seriously. So after 2 years of just continuing to try to get support racked up as many places as possible, I started getting it on the agenda. The traffic safety chair put the bill on the agenda. And once it got on the agenda in the first committee, it flew. I had brought together a group of survivors and loved ones who'd lost somebody in a texting while driving accident, and also victims who were actually in a crash who were injured. And I brought them together to testify at each committee meeting. So it was very it was really pulling at their heartstrings. And it moved through each committee in the House. I remember in 2018, for the first time, it passed the House. It didn't pass the Senate. It went through like 2 committees in the Senate. And then the next year, I think 2019 was when we actually did pass it. And it was unbelievable that we actually finally got it passed. I think it had 4 committee stops in the House, and it had 4 committee stops in the Senate. And it wasn't exactly the bill that I had filed, the original bill, but through a negotiation with the Senate and other committees, different amendments were put onto it to make it more palatable. It ended up being texting while driving was a primary offense in the state of Florida. And in active construction zones, it was hands-free. You can't hold your phone while you're driving. And in school zones, you can't hold your phone at all while driving. So that was kind of the compromise that we had made with the House and the Senate. And, it's very difficult to get traffic safety legislation passed because most legislation affects a segment of our population, like either hospitals, businesses, small segments of our population. Most legislation affects, but this affects 22 million Floridians and our guests. So it's just so huge to get traffic safety legislation passed. And ultimately we got it passed, and it feels good to know that this legislation could be saving lives on our roadways. Another traffic safety issue that I focused in on was school bus safety too. And one other piece of legislation I passed was I increased the fines for drivers who pass school buses. School buses are stopped, the long arm is out, kids are getting on and off the bus, and drivers are just passing school buses. And it's insane. And so I increased the fines for passing school buses, but there was one piece of legislation I didn't get passed, which I do wish, I hope maybe one of my colleagues will continue to try, which was putting cameras on the long arms of school buses, because the only way you can really enforce this kind of law is by either law enforcement following the school bus from school bus stop to bus stop. And we know that's not practical, and we don't really have those resources. So legislation allowing school buses to put the camera on the long arms is something that I really was advocating for. And every year I filed the bill, it just didn't really get any traction. So hopefully somebody will follow up on that. We did lose a young 10-year-old girl at a bus stop in Fort Pierce, Yoseni Gonzalez. Her mom took her to the bus stop, and as the kid was getting out, crossing the street to go to the bus, a car just bypassed the bus and hit her. And it's just very unfortunate. And her mom witnessed her daughter killed right in front of the bus stop. So I hope we could get legislation on the books for this. But while I was in Tallahassee, I didn't just focus in on traffic safety. I also wanted to help women. We sit in the House of Representatives, and on the floor of the House of Representatives, there's pictures on the wall of each speaker of the House. And every previous speaker of the House has been male. It's just all males, every single picture. And I just felt we could do more for women. So I met through time, I met a woman named Gail Gardner, and she came to my office and she was telling me her life story. She actually lived in Orlando. She was living in Orlando, and in 1988, an armed intruder broke into her house and violently and viciously sexually assaulted her. And Gail Gardner did what most people do after they're assaulted. She called the police. She called the police, made a police report, and sat for a very invasive exam of herself, and sat for hours and did what she was supposed to do. Well, you would think that they used her evidence and her rape kit and tested it, but unfortunately, that's not what happened. It sat on a shelf for over 30 years, untested. And she would go to sleep at night with the lights on, looking over her shoulder when she walked the streets. And she was in fear that her attacker was after her. Lo and behold, it turned out her attacker had been incarcerated for the last decade of her life. So she didn't even know that. Her rape kit, they found 30 years later on a shelf. They finally got to testing it. And it turned out this was a serial rapist that had raped her. But she was very upset about the situation. And she said, we need to do more we need accountability in our system. So I filed a bill called Gail's Law. And what that did was it required the Florida Department of Law Enforcement to create and maintain a tracking system. If we could track a pizza, if we could track our Amazon package, why shouldn't we be tracking a rape kit through the process? I mean, it was unbelievable that this could really happen. And so I brought together the Florida Department of Law Enforcement and some sexual advocacy groups, and we worked on this legislation. And last year we got Gail's Law passed into law, and by May 2023, it will be fully implemented throughout the state. And so I think this will bring a level of accountability. It will also give victims a power of tracking their rape kit through the process. And I see Commissioner McKinlay has showed up. Hi, Commissioner McKinlay. And she's also been such a really big advocate for victims of sexual assault and others. So hello there. Thanks for joining us. And thank you for all that you do too for women and victims. Yeah, that was really a big deal. And I guess finally what I'll talk about is another piece of legislation. This was another piece of legislation that I strongly wanted to pass, and I filed it last legislative session with Senator Lori Berman. We were working with National Organization of Women and a group called Families Against Court Travesties. And a lot of women had been coming to our offices discussing their issues as it relates to time sharing and financial responsibility between parents that are fighting for custody. And what we're proposing as legislation would be to require court proceedings to be recorded at their trial level. Right now, there's real no requirement, and a lot of women are just saying that they're not, because there's no proceedings, or no recordings, it's hard to really appeal that trial court decision. So that was something that Senator Berman and I filed last session, and we didn't get passed, but I'm sure Senator Berman will continue trying to file and pass that legislation, which is really beneficial for families that are going through nasty divorces and fighting over parental responsibility. I guess, and finally, and in closing, I want to say, as I reflect on the last 6 years, it's really been a truly rewarding and satisfying experience when as a woman and as a woman Democrat, when you make a difference in so many people's lives and that you can really effectuate change. My advice for advocating or trying to get issues is probably to whatever the issue is, to try to find one or two champions of that issue in the legislature, or in the commission, or in the city government, wherever there's jurisdiction of that issue. You go to them and you find that champion, and you kind of stay on top of them. It's kind of what Gail and I did. She called me, and we talked every week, and we talked about a plan every week, how we're going to further this piece of legislation. And also what I did with traffic safety advocates, we made a plan every week. How are we going to move this through to the next process? So I think it's very important to find one or two champions on an issue, and engage with them and continue following up to see what our next steps are, and just to stay on top of it, because it's really, really rewarding and satisfying when you can make a difference. And it's been a pleasure speaking to you. My assistant is here. If you heard her, she was talking in the background. And thanks for having me. And I don't know when, but we'll take questions whenever that's appropriate. So thank you so much. And it's truly been an honor and a pleasure.
Thank you so much. I do have one question. You talked about filing. I love how you talked about making noise. I think hearing that someone told you basically your law was hopeless and that you kept making noise and kept pushing was really, I think, beneficial for us to hear, because I think at times it might feel like some of the legislation that we, discussed and talked about feels a little hopeless at times in Florida. Could you talk briefly about that process of filing? Like, what is the length and what happens before it actually goes to vote?
Okay, that's a great question. Okay, so before I file, like, usually we'll sit down, we'll talk with whoever's idea the legislation was. We'll also have a meeting with the drafters in the Florida House. So as a state representative, I get to file 6 bills. And say you come to me and say, I want to file a bill that makes texting and driving a primary offense. We'll sit down, we'll have a meeting, and then we'll put it into draft. We'll sit with the drafters, talk a little bit about it. We'll put it into drafting. The drafters will come back with a version. We'll go over it, talk about it. If it looks good, we'll press file. And once we press file, it will be assigned to 3 committees or 4 committees, depending on how leadership thinks of it. If they love it, it might have 2 committees. If they hate it, it will have 4 committees. And so let's just say if this bill gets assigned to Traffic Safety Committee, Government Affairs Committee, and Judiciary Committee. So we'll have 3 committee stops. Our job is to make sure that we speak to the chair of the first committee. We say, we want it on the agenda. Please put it on the agenda. We get people that support it to speak to the chair. We kind of like put a lot of pressure as much as we can. If we want to really make noise, we'll have a press conference at the House of Representatives. We'll have a press conference, in his district. We'll have we'll try to make as much noise as possible, do editorials to the paper, and until that chair will give us a committee hearing. And once he does, then it goes up for a vote in front of that committee. So the first committee would be Traffic Safety Committee. It will get on the agenda. It goes before a vote, and before it goes for a vote, most representatives will probably call all the committee members to make sure that we have enough support that it will pass. So it has to just pass by a majority in that committee. And most of the time, you'll just call and kind of explain what the bill is, what it does, and ask if there's any objections, and try to get it hashed out before it goes to committee. And then the same thing with the next committee step, you'll have to work on another chair of that committee, get him to put it on the agenda. You'll have to call all of those committee members and get their support as well. So you'll do that through each committee stop that it's assigned, which is usually about 3 committees. And then after it ends its first committee, then you have to kind of go to the Speaker of the House and ask the Speaker of the House to put it on the agenda for the full vote of the Florida House of Representatives. And that's just the House of Representatives. It's also going to have to travel the same method through the Florida Senate. So you'll have a companion bill in the Senate who is also going to file it and then put it through those committees, and also wait for it to get to the floor of the Senate. And I've had a bill. It does get frustrating when it's moving in your chamber and it's passed through your chamber and it doesn't pass in the other, or vice versa. So you always have to kind of stay on the same track with your senator to make sure that it's moving at the same pace and the same objections are being heard, and kind of, if amendments are needed, they're being placed, and that the bill language matches identically to the Senate language. Because sometimes amendments are put on by other members in the Senate or in the House that don't actually match. So you have to make sure the product is the same in the House and in the Senate. And It's definitely a long road, and there's a lot of moving pieces while it's moving through the process. But yeah, you have to kind of follow it and be on top of it at all times, because you have to make sure that it's going to be the same thing. And usually it comes out, you get it to match somehow at the end. You get the language to line up.
Helene, did you have a question?
Yeah, I guess my question is, where does the financing for this kind of stuff? I mean, who pays for all this making noise and press conferences? And I don't understand that meshing.
Well, that's a great question. It's interesting. Well, for the press conferences, it didn't, like, we didn't really use funding. We just, like, we kind of, you have press contact lists as a legislator, like our minority office, our kind of minority caucus has a whole like press list of contacts, and you don't really, it doesn't really take much funding to do, kind of just to create, to write up a little press release and send it out. And the House of Representatives always offers its like podium and areas to do press conferences. So it really doesn't take much funding to get everything together, to pull it together. You just kind of had the press list. You ask the House of Representatives, the sergeant, if we could, we borrow the podium, and if we can kind of set up at a certain time and date, and they sign off on it. Or if it's down here in the district, you kind of work with stakeholders, whether it be sexual assault, the sexual assault response team, or in Palm Beach County, or if it's other, you kind of just talk about it and work it out together, what venues you can use. And it doesn't really cost that much to kind of throw together a press conference. It's kind of, it takes time and a little bit of resources, but it doesn't really take funding to get it together, as long as you're working with the right groups.
Can I ask a question? How many people are you working with in your committee, like to get all this done? How many people does this take?
Well, you mean in the committees that
you're working on this? Like, it's not just you, obviously. So it's you have a team that is on top of people. So it's like
we have okay, that's a great question. Like, the bigger your team is, the better for you. So I'd say for my for the traffic safety bill legislation, I had about 3 volunteers in my office. I have a legislative assistant, and I have a district secretary. And then we also kind of work with like different advocacy groups. So maybe 1 or 2 or 3 people from a different nonprofit or an advocacy group who's very focused in on that issue. And the more people that you have working together, I'd say the better, because not only was I traveling to some of these counties, I had some of the volunteers and some of the advocates in other parts of the state traveling as well, when it was more convenient for them to get to one of those counties. So yeah, I would say definitely the bigger the better. As it relates to like the committees in the House, like the assigned committees, where like traffic safety committee or the judiciary committee, there's about, just depending if it's a subcommittee, if it's a full committee, I'd say about 13 members on those committees in the House. I think it's less in the Senate.
Thank you, everyone, for those questions. Anything, I think the last question would be anything that's coming up maybe in the next session, or things that you're hearing that are in the works that maybe we should be kind of keeping our eyes on or making note of?
That's a great question. I've been so focused in on raising my 4-month-old. I haven't really been too much, focused in on the next legislative session. So I haven't really been aware. Obviously there's some negative issues that are going around that, we passed last legislative session that I'm not really going to discuss, but yeah, I'm not really sure what's coming up. I apologize.
No problem. Well, we look forward to seeing you more now that you're going to be local and not having to run back and forth to Tallahassee all the time. And we hope that you get to bring Dory to one of our events and we get to see you in person and meet her in person. And we really appreciate you joining us this morning. Is there any last questions? Commissioner McKinley?
Can you see Dory?
Oh, yeah. She's.
I mean, we can hear her. Let's see what we're all fighting for.
Hold on, let's see. Dory, say hi. Is that Dory?
Oh,
Is that Dory?
congratulations.
Thank you. Hi, say hi.
Yes, I
Oh,
think
she's so
any of us
cute.
that have had to try to work from home with a baby or a kid are amazed at how well she just babbled and was happy that entire time you were speaking. So that's
She's
incredible.
such a good girl. Yeah, she's sleeping through the night and learning to roll over this week. So we can't be more proud of her.
It moves quickly. Thank you again so much. You're welcome to
Thank
stay
you.
with us today. Now we're going to turn it over to Commissioner McKinley. Melissa McKinley was elected to the Palm Beach County, Florida Board of County Commissioners in 2014 and re-elected in 2018. Prior to her election, Commissioner McKinley spent nearly 20 years advocating for women, children, and families as a legislative aide to the Palm Beach County Legislative Affairs Office, to members of Congress and the U.S. Senate, and as a volunteer with several organizations. She served as mayor of Palm Beach County from 2017 to 2018. Commissioner McKinley has spent a great deal of her career volunteering for philanthropic organizations and is a founding member of Palm Beach County Sexual Assault Response Team and Palm Beach County's first sexual assault response medical service center, the Butterfly House. Her priorities are infrastructure improvements and economic development in the Glades region of her district, affordable housing, addressing the nation's opioid heroin overdose crisis, human trafficking, safe neighborhoods, prevention programs for children, and providing opportunities and environments for families to succeed in Palm Beach County. Thank you so much for joining us, Commissioner McKinley. I'm so grateful that we have someone who has represented the state and then someone who's represented locally here, but I know you have a lot of experience at the state level as well and makes you a perfect fit for our discussion today. I think our members are really interested in hearing about your experience in the legislative system. And again, kind of just helping us understand the process so that as we move forward into the next session, we are kind of able to follow things as they progress and have a better understanding of how we can advocate for things that we believe in. So welcome, Commissioner McKinley.
Hi, Holly. Thank you so much for having me. And Representative, it's so great to see you. And I'm so happy and for you and your little one. What a beautiful thing to be a mother, but also a beautiful tribute to name her after your sister. I think that's pretty amazing. And just on a side note, your conversation about your legislation with Senator Berman about tape recording those proceedings. I was one of those moms who went through that and tried to appeal the magistrate's decision and could only get an audio copy, which when we tried to appeal it to the circuit court, it wasn't enough. And so I wasn't able to appeal that child support decision, and some things that were promised in that proceeding were never issued in the final order. And for lack of a better term, as a young single mom, I got screwed on that one. So I love seeing that you're doing that legislation. So aside from that, good morning, everybody. I am in my last 21 days in office. I hit the 3-week mark at yesterday, and it's been a wonderful ride. I know I've got about 30 minutes, and I'm looking at the audience here, and I'm seeing some folks that are far more seasoned in this process than I am. So I'm humbled to be in such good company. But I'm going to start, since I'll go real quick. I was taking some notes as I was listening to Representative Slosberg-King speak, and so I'll go real fast over some examples of things that I've been able to do as both a volunteer, an elected leader at the local level, and also trying to combine that with our friends at the state and the federal level. So I would say first things first, and a tip, just because it's kind of funny and how I got started. The first thing that you should always do when you're going to meet with any elected official or somebody that you're trying to influence is to make sure that you know your audience. And I'll give you a funny example. I was a volunteer with the Junior League, which I still am, have been for 25 years, and 24 of those have been serving on their public affairs team. I see one of my colleagues, Natalia, on the call here, fellow league member. But I went into a meeting with a senator to talk about the Road to Independence Act, which was passed to benefit our foster kids years ago. And there were things that we didn't like about that bill and that we thought needed to be fixed. And she very politely sat with us and listened to the whole thing. And Emily, it was Nancy Dietert. And so she, at the conclusion of my comments, she said, "Are you finished?" And I said, "Yes, Senator, thank you so much for your time." She goes, "Good, now let me tell you, I wrote that bill and I don't have any problems with it." I'm like, oh. So always know a little bit about the person that you're going to speak with when you go in to speak with them. But I'm going to start off with the butterfly house since Emily brought that up. And that was something that I worked on well before I was elected. We started on that in 2010 and actually opened up the butterfly house in 2011. I wasn't elected until 2014, but I was working for the county at the time in the legislative affairs office. And this was right when Senator Elizabeth Benaquisto was elected. And if you remember at the very tail end of her campaign, there were some comments made about her support for women who had been survivors of sexual assault. And so she went on and she did that commercial, one of the most memorable political commercials I've ever seen, where it was just a black screen behind her. And she talked about how she had been sexually assaulted as a freshman in college and how that changed the trajectory of her life. At that point, she called me and she said, "Miami has this great sexual assault response center. We don't have one. I want one." And I said, "Yes, ma'am. Yes, Senator." You know, she's been a good friend. And so what we did there was kind of unique. So, you know, Lizbeth is a conservative Republican. She is not pro-choice. She supports it in certain circumstances, but not in general. But we needed to get this response center, we needed to get the butterfly house open. And so she asked me to put together a table of leaders for her. And so what we did is we reached across to audiences that she normally wouldn't work with. So we had our business community represented with one of the area hospitals. Of course, we had the elected leaders. We had our state attorney with us. We had law enforcement with us. We had victim services with us. We brought in the judiciary. But then we reached across, we brought in the National Organization of Women, but the real leader at the table was Planned Parenthood. And you don't typically see a Republican working with Planned Parenthood, right? But we all could agree that making sure that this center was in our community and that women and men had access to those services after being sexually assaulted was important. And so when we showed that united front, we gained a lot of respect from the people that we were asking for help. And we were asking for help from the business community. We needed the hospital, it was a private hospital, to host us at their location. We needed our federal partners on board because we were seeking federal funding at the time, and we had both of our US senators on board with us. And we needed the county commission at that time on board, which was a split board between Republicans and Democrats. Eventually, you know, she had to get support from the legislature and a lot of the things that she did. And when she could show that widespread system behind her, we got that center opened up with state and federal funding, local support, and the support of the business community, a true public-private partnership in 1 year. In 1 year, that center, we cut the ribbon. So pretty amazing. As a result of that, we then we started noticing, we put together that sexual assault response team, and we brought in that same kind of table of leaders. We expanded it to include our education system, our healthcare systems, and all sorts of community leaders. Within 5 years, that team was named the Sexual Assault Response Team of the Year by the state association. And we started talking about where were there glitches in Florida law that prevented victims from accessing services. And the senator and her colleagues in Tallahassee really listened to the information and the requests that were coming out of that committee. And they've been very successful in passing legislation. I see Linda Geller Schwartz on here. Certainly the National Council of Jewish Women is one that has been tremendously successful, and we reached out to that partnership, and we worked on things together. And I'll give you two examples of work that came out of that project. The first one, of course, is everything that Linda and NCJW has done in the realm of human trafficking. But when Emily tells you that you've got to get your bill through the House and then you've got to get your bill through the Senate, I was able to be a local champion on that. Her House champion on that was Dave Kerner. Her Senate champion on that, she reached across the aisle, and it was Jack Latvala at the time. And Linda's bill was cruising right along in the House until I piped up and said, I want language on it that allows local governments to require the posting of the human trafficking hotline. She was working on it for transportation hubs. I wanted to be able to post that at adult entertainment facilities that are, the massage parlors, the toy stores, the video stores, and the strip clubs. And Dave Kerner said, don't mess up my bill. I said, well, I'm going to mess it up anyway, but I promise you we'll get it through. And so we added that language on the Senate side. I quietly went behind Dave Kerner's back and met with the Speaker of the House, and he was okay with that language. And then we went to Dave and assured him it was okay when it came over from the Senate that it would pass. And that's how that became law. But it was really everybody working together and making sure, if I hadn't had the support to get that language on, I certainly wouldn't have put it on there because Linda's bill needed to pass. But that's one example of the community collaboration and things that we realized needed to be fixed. And so, Linda, congratulations on that success. Another issue that came out of that committee was, and the Junior League had been working on this. The Junior League State Public Affairs Committee was working on making sure that unaccompanied minors had access to seek their own healthcare treatment. So if you were an emancipated youth in Florida and you were under the age of 18, you could not go to the doctor. I mean, you could go for a mental health reason, for a reproductive health reason. But other than that, any other preventative care, you were prohibited from seeking. So if you had asthma, you had to have an asthma attack and show up in an emergency room in order to get help. You couldn't just go and have a regular appointment with your doctor and get your medication. And so the league was working on fixing that glitch in Florida law when the sexual assault response team mentioned, did you know an unaccompanied minor can't request their own sexual assault exam? So you had these young girls that would go in and try to seek help. They had been raped, and they had to get a court order to be able to get that sexual assault exam. And so we all worked together, that same partnership, and we fixed that. We closed that loophole, at the same time also allowing the unaccompanied minors to get their own health care. So, and then we had to compromise a little bit, right? Because your conservatives in the legislature wanted to make sure that that didn't undo any of the parental notification laws for somebody under the age of 18 seeking an abortion. So we had to make sure that we didn't step on those toes, and we did. And so we were able to get our law passed with full support from the legislature. Another project, then you start talking about, you're talking about trafficking, you're talking about unaccompanied minors, you're talking about a vulnerable population. That kind of led us into the whole expanding on the foster care youth in our community. And so listening, having been involved in that conversation for so long at the state level, had a project as a county commissioner come before me for zoning approval. And it was in my district. Well, it's in my district now that the lines have been redrawn. Before, when it was coming before us, the people who were complaining about it were in my district. The facility was right across the street. So it was kind of like one of those raining in Florida, right? Where it's raining on one side of the street, but not on the other. And so that was Home Safe. And Home Safe was trying to rezone a piece of property that had already been approved for a daycare or a private school. And instead they wanted to do a shelter, a residential facility for foster youth. At the time it was boys. Since it's now girls between the ages of 12 and 18. And the neighbors were adamantly opposed. And I was running for re-election, and I've got a petition with 700 of my constituents signing it that opposed it. And so I very quietly called in the junior league and said, I need you to come sit in the audience and fill out a speaker card and speak in favor of this. So, you know, I had to bring in reinforcements on that one and stand up for the little voices that didn't have the ability to show up at that meeting and speak on their own behalf. And so when you're trying to get something done, sometimes you've got to not be the voice yourself. You've got to have other people come in and be the voice to influence those around you. It makes it easier for you to say, okay, now will you support me? And we passed that foster care home on a vote of 7-0. So I'm pretty proud of that. I'm going to quickly go through 3 other examples. Some a little bit more timely. Then the next one that we had to work on was the opioid crisis. Many of you know it's a personal issue for me. My mother was addicted to prescription pain medication after injuring her back, serving as a charge nurse at the crisis unit and having to do adult takedowns for 30 years. She ruined her back. And, you know, that led to watching friends pass away from accidental overdoses. And I think the one that sealed it for me that we needed to be doing more was when my former chief of staff lost her daughter after a 12-year battle at the very tail end of 2016. And I had reached out to some other leaders in our community and said, hey, will you ask the governor to declare a public health crisis? And they said no. And I kind of went back to my office and felt a little defeated. And then I thought, well, wait a second, I'm elected. I can make the ask. And so I did, and I ruffled a lot of feathers, and it wasn't going anywhere. The governor was pretty much ignoring us at the time. And so I thought, well, if he's not going to listen to a female Democrat in Palm Beach County, I'm gonna get other people on board. And so, as I mentioned, you know, build your audience and let other people be your voice. After you've thrown the first grenade out there, get your army of soldiers behind you. And so I got the law enforcement community behind us. We got fire rescue and the union, which is very politically powerful in Tallahassee. We got them behind us. We got all of the chambers of commerce, the economic council, the business development board. So we brought in all of those business leaders who are voices that they really listen to in Tallahassee. We brought in our state attorney finally came on board, our healthcare community came on board, and then our chief judge. You know, we brought in the judicial system, which usually doesn't speak up a whole lot in Tallahassee on any type of issue. They tend not to get engaged in political battles, but when our chief judge spoke up, it was within probably 2 or 3 weeks after he did that the governor finally turned around and declared that public health crisis. So tremendous success in expanding your partners. You don't have to do it all by yourself. And sometimes it's better if you don't. You can have the idea and you can have the issue, but let the people who they listen to the most in Tallahassee carry it for you and just work behind the scenes. 2 other issues where that's come in real handy for me. The first one is the farm worker housing crisis that I had in my district in 2019. If you remember that story, we just approved funding for it yesterday. But if you remember that story, that was the story with the mother with the 1-year-old the little boy had cockroaches stuck in his ear and had to have them surgically removed. And the little sisters, they were twin 6-year-olds. She had the girls wouldn't sleep in their bed because they were getting bitten by rats at night. And it's not an exaggeration. I went and toured that facility within 24 hours of finding out about that one. The mother opened up the home to us and we immediately got her in emergency housing. And I went to work but that I'm not exaggerating. She had all of the baby clothes, Emily, can you imagine all of her baby clothes were wrapped in saran wrap to keep the rodents from chewing them. And you could see the droppings on the sheets and the bunk beds. So she had all of the little girls and the baby and her husband, they were all sleeping in one room that they tried to keep as clean as possible. And the house was as tidy as she could make it. Her older son was the valedictorian of their high school and was on full scholarship at the University of Florida. I mean, these were hardworking folks, and they didn't deserve to live like that. And so I did what I thought was the best thing, and I reached across the aisle and I called Senator Rubio, which I've only done twice. I usually work through his staff, but I called him and I said, I need your help. This is an emergency, and this is unacceptable. And we worked together, and we got the housing authority turned around. We brought in a third-party management team to clean it up. And yesterday, the county commission approved funding in the amount of $2.5 million to be able to draw down a $10.8 million grant from USDA to completely renovate the rest of the units at those two farm worker housing complexes. But in that scenario, what I really had to do was I had to use the media. And so I befriended a reporter from NBC out of Washington, DC. And I flew up there. I was there for a conference and stayed an extra day to meet with her. And then she flew her whole team down there. And once that hit the national media wire, it really drew attention to the whole issue. And Senator Rubio was able to pass an amendment onto a bill that required all farm worker housing units within USDA's portfolio had to be inspected and a report issued to Congress so that they could go in and put the funding in there to start fixing those. So the lesson learned there is don't ever be afraid to reach across the aisle. If that elected leader is the one who can get things done, then that's who you need to work with. You know, Senator Nelson said it best, politics matters up until election day. And after election day, you need to work with the person who's in office because they're the ones who are going to get things done for you. And then the last example I'll give you is a little more current. And I got a lot of flack because I made a big deal when the governor made the decision in Palm Beach County during the early days of the COVID pandemic. He made that decision to pilot a project that would send the state allocation of vaccines to the Publixes in our county and have Publix be the sole distributor of the state issued vaccines. Now, the media wanted me to buy into the argument that I thought that was influenced by a campaign contribution. I never, and I still do not think that was influenced by a campaign contribution. And I told the media that. And but in the process, I did manage to piss off the governor. But I always thought it was just he didn't understand what Palm Beach County looked like. He had never been out to the Glades region, not while he was campaigning, and certainly not after he was elected. And a lot of people, even my colleagues across the country, don't realize how big of a rural agricultural community we have in Palm Beach County. We really are the tale of two cities in this county. And he wasn't listening to me. His communications team was being very nasty because I raised that issue. So I quietly went behind and I got Jared Moskowitz, who understood what Palm Beach County looked like. I said, Jared, I need your help. And in the meantime, there are a few groups that they'll listen to in Tallahassee. One of them is the Small County Coalition. They represent the 38 rural small counties in Florida, which are very conservative, very Republican counties. And so they carry a big stick in Tallahassee. And also the Florida Fruit and Vegetable Association and the Florida Farm Bureau. And I asked all three of those organizations to go to the governor's office and say, hey, you know, our rural communities, our small communities, most of us don't have Publix. So if this is the way you're going to go, it's going to be a problem for us. We were the last county he tried to do that kind of a pilot in. And I think because of the attention that we put on the issue. But I was the voice that raised the issue, but I wasn't the voice that carried the solution to it. So, you know, find those partners that you can work with. And it's okay if they get the credit. The credit doesn't matter so long as people have access to the services that they need. So those are just some good lessons, and I want to leave a few minutes for questions, but it's been an honor to represent Palm Beach County. Do not underestimate the power that your local elected officials have to help you in Tallahassee and in Washington. You know, all of us, there's 7 county commissioners. I don't even know how many city commissioners there are. I see Rochelle's on the call, but every one of us, we have our own passion, our own issues that we want to work on. So if you come to me and you say, hey, I want the state to do this in terms of, the drug epidemic or foster kids or guardian ad litem, and you come to me, I'm going to use my voice in Tallahassee to help that issue because it's the right thing to do, but it's also very important to me. And we all have relationships. And then the other one, I've served as the president of 2 statewide associations, the first one being the Junior League and the second one being the Florida Association of Counties. Use your associations if you have them. I know Linda, NCJW, has a national. I'm not sure if you have one at the state level. I'm not sure if yours is just local, but use that association, reach out to your membership. And every year at the beginning of your calendar year, I know the league's calendar year usually starts in September and it ends in May because they take the summer off. The beginning of each year, evaluate your membership, survey them, say, who do you have a relationship with? What elected leader anywhere in the country? And keep that list handy because you never know when you'll have to be, when you can call on them and use their voice to carry your issue. And then last, if you are invited to participate in any kind of association work or leadership opportunity, take advantage of it because I did a women's leadership program for 25 elected leaders across the country. One of them just ran, she didn't win her primary, but she ran for governor in Rhode Island. Another one's running for Congress in Ohio. One is running statewide in New Mexico. One's elected statewide in Arizona. I mean, and I can call on all of these women across the country and ask for their help from time to time. So never underestimate the power of association. So Polly, I'll hand it back to you.
I want to open it up to see if anybody has any questions or comments. I have a couple that I'll share. Go ahead, Linda. You can start.
First of all, I just wanted to thank Melissa for all the work she's done. I mean, it's been a terrific run and what you've got so many things left out for people that have helped this community and just thank you. Secondly, I guess I want to say, reinforce what you said about the importance of working with people and coalitions and crossing the aisle. It's sometimes really hard to do it, but in terms of the human trafficking legislation that you talked about, it was a really strong coalition of diverse groups within the community that had the initial impact, started it going, and then between you and Dave Kerner sort of carried the ball. But I just wanted to recount one little incident that, because Emily had been talking about getting a bill heard before a committee. When we were going to the first committee in human trafficking, there was no appetite to take it up. And we just had calls going into the chairman's office without end until finally they contacted Dave Kerner and said, please stop calling. Please, we can't do anything. Our office is totally jammed. Please stop. And he said, well, you know how to stop. Put it on the committee. And that started it. So just between coalition and noise, as Emily said, it really makes a difference. So thank you, Emily, and thank you, Melissa.
Linda, I will tell you on the noise, and Emily has perfected the ability to reach across the aisle and form a coalition on the work that she's done. Traffic safety is one of the hardest issues. I worked for 15 years on a booster seat bill. It boggles my mind that that's so difficult. I forgot what I was going to say. It'll come back to me. What was I going to say? I'm still sipping my coffee. I haven't gotten that far into it, so.
Well, I had mentioned earlier too that this year Horizon, we're focusing on 3 specific topics. So housing insecurity, affordable childcare, and reproductive justice. And there was someone sent me a question in the chat box specific about reproductive justice. And we've definitely reached out to different coalitions and different organizations to help champion our belief in that. Is there any thoughts or anything that you want to, either one of you want to share about that, or organizations that we should be reaching out to, or specific legislative members or elected officials that we should be reaching out to when it comes to reproductive justice?
I'll start and then I'll kick it over to Emily. I was gonna say to go back to Linda real quick, the phone calls and the emails. Phone calls, as soon as an office tells you, please stop calling, stop calling. There are other ways. On the emails, don't send the form email. You know, if I get 300 of the same emails, I don't even read them. If you send me a personal email, even if it's 3 sentences, that's far more effective than just sending the same thing that's this long that nobody's going to read. Your most powerful tool this day and age is social media. If you've got a comment, you want to get somebody's attention, tag them on social media, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. I would say Facebook and Twitter are probably your 2 more powerful tools. Instagram for me is just a happy place to see baby pictures, but the other 2 are very powerful, especially Twitter. On the reproductive health, reproductive justice, that's going to be a tough one. I gotta tell you, and Emily might have, Emily will have something to add. I fear that we're going to lose all of our rights, you know, within 2 weeks of Election Day. I think there'll be a special session, and I think you'll see even more restrictive legislation filed. So you've got to put the voices. I think it's extremely powerful when you get somebody who's not afraid to tell their story, to get up there and tell their story of surviving sexual assault, of surviving incest, tell the story of being a young teenager who was scared at 17 and found out she was pregnant and you know, couldn't go home, couldn't tell mom and dad. You know, get women in, and if you can get the men who've helped support women in their lives who've made those decisions to stand up and tell their story, I think right now that's the only thing that's going to make a difference.
And I just want to add to what Melissa just said about advocating. You know, social media is incredibly powerful, but and also one additional thing is I loved it when people would come straight to make an appointment and make it like to advocate for that issue, you know, either before a vote or before session started to try to talk about it and keep it fresh in my mind. So I think also making appointments with legislators, as many as possible, to keep the issue and get that issue brought up and keep it fresh in their mind. As it relates to reproductive justice, you know, Planned Parenthood is obviously has been the major organization, but it's really going to be a difficult time up there. I mean, we don't know what this election is going to bring. We don't know, you know, the Republicans could pick up a few more seats. We don't really know what it's going to look like, but there might be a super majority in the House, and it's going to be difficult. There are some champions for women's rights, like Representative Robin Bartleman has been a champion for women's rights, and she would be one to talk to about what's coming up in this next legislative session, and you know what we could do to advocate for women's rights.
Aline, do you have a question?
It's not political, but I don't. Are women in this state just not educated? I hate to say it that way. I don't understand. I mean, I'm watching 49 other states go through it too, so, you know, but why is it so hard to communicate to women about this? I mean, I know it's a ridiculous question, but you know, we're a week away from losing 70 years worth of rights. And how does that happen?
I have
How
two
did it
theories
happen?
on that. I have two theories. The first one, people vote. The very first thing people vote with is their wallet. That's the very first thing. And so if the economy has created a situation where they're not doing well, that's the most important thing that they vote on at the ballot box. If they're doing okay at home, then they start to look at the other issues. They start to look at the abortion issue. They start to look at LGBTQ rights and the things that matter the most to us. I mean, I think I vote my conscience before anything else. I figure, a rainy day is a rainy day. The sun will come out at some point, but I'm never going to get my rights back if I give them away. But I think too many people vote their wallet. And then I think the other thing, and I'll be frank, I think that the party that supports choice most has done an absolutely horrible job at messaging. To allow the other side to run away with the argument that somehow we support abortion that's unrestricted, unfettered access to the day of delivery, and we've done nothing to counter that. Like, no, we don't. And by the way, we're all pro-life. Just one of us believes that a woman should have a choice over her body and the other one doesn't. Like, we have not, and I know we're not supposed to get too political here, but we need to wash out the whole party leadership and put somebody in there that knows how to respond to those accusations and message these issues more appropriately. I mean, I think we're all very reasonable. I think that the law that you had in Florida, that we already had a law in the books that restricted abortion after 24 weeks, except in the case of the mother's health. I think we can all agree that that's reasonable. We didn't want to do anything to lessen that and to take away that access. And instead, we've got the other side that is saying we support it up until the day of birth. Like, no, we don't. But Helene, we haven't responded accurately or appropriately to any of this, and we have fallen on that messaging. And if we have any hope in 24, we need new leadership.
Thank you. I think I saw Rochelle's hand up as well.
Morning, everybody. I just wanted to echo Linda's thanks to Emily and Melissa for all the work that they have done fighting for us, fighting for women across the board. And I know that as they both move on, their voices will not be silent, and they will continue to be massive forces in moving us forward and working to help us get where we need to go in the state and the country. So thank you both for all that you've done.
Thanks, Michelle. I really want to thank Emily. Emily, you've had such a difficult job getting reasonable legislation passed, and at the same time, you've had to relive tragedy that you went through every single day, and being able to do that, and your courage and your perseverance. I hope nobody ever forgets how much you went through to make things safer for people. You're going to be missed.
Oh, thank you so much, Melissa. And it's actually been a true pleasure watching you grow. I remember when you first started running, when I was working with Judge Slosberg, if you were running for judge, I think when you were first running for your first term, and to see you go from behind the scenes in the legislative to go in front of the scenes, it was tremendous. Like, you've done an excellent job, all the way to watching you advocate fiercely for your constituents in the Glades against the governor. And, you've done a tremendous job, and very, very humbled and honored to be speaking with you in one of the last speaking events as an elected official. So it's been truly a pleasure. So thank you for that. And to Horizon too, thank you for all that you do. It's really, I'm truly honored to be speaking to this group, and like I definitely, your issues are definitely near and dear to my heart.
Thank you both. And I always joke that my dream job was to be the Today Show host. So I'm going to put on my anchor and ask Commissioner McKinlay the hard question. Representative Slosberg has told us her plans after this election. Are you able to share what your upcoming plans are, Commissioner McKinlay, after your term is over in the next few weeks?
So I'm not running for office. But I had to get a legal opinion and a local ethics and a state ethics commission opinion on what I could and could not do. And what I'm allowed to do, but while I'm still sitting on the dais, is interview and entertain interests. I am not allowed to commit to a job or sign any contracts. And so I don't have anything to announce yet, but I will still be hopefully involved in the public affairs, legislative space, but just on the private sector side of the aisle. But I'm not giving up my volunteer work with the league. And so I'm still happy to help you on all of your issues. And just a quick question for you, Holly. I heard you say reproductive justice was one of 3. So what are your other 2 priorities?
So housing insecurity, about 2 weeks ago, we hosted a virtual panel with some of the Lord's Place and community partners and Housing Leadership Council about housing insecurity in Palm Beach County. We did discuss the housing bond. I was going to bring that up, and I don't know if you want to share it all. I know, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that when that vote had initially come up, that you had expressed concern about putting an extra tax burden on citizens here in Palm Beach County. And when we did our panel, like Jennifer has said, we are nonpartisan. So we really just wanted to let everyone know what the bond is about so that they can make an educated decision on it. Is there anything that you want to share about the housing bond before we let you go?
Well, I mean, I voted to not put it on the ballot and ask that question, but there it is. So I would only tell you, and I think it's, if the voters vote yes, the county will figure out a great program. And if they vote no, then we've got to figure out a different way to do things. There is talk right now at the county building that this money will be used to create a revolving loan fund. So it's not like you're going to get $200 million in the door on Monday, and then by the end of the month, you will have issued $200 million in grants and the money is gone. So the idea is you would give out small loans to close the gap on gap financing on these projects, and those loans would be repaid, so that fund would constantly be replenished. So if that's something that you think you would support, then vote yes. And if you don't want to pay the added ad valorem tax on your bill, then vote no. But if it passes, I would encourage you all to lobby the county in support of creating that kind of a funding mechanism, that revolving loan fund. That's what makes Miami-Dade County so much more successful in drawing down dollars, is they have a dedicated revenue source. And so they're able to draw down federal dollars at probably 2 to 3 times the rate we're able to. And so that would be my advice. Lobby the county to make it a revolving loan fund.
Thank you. And our third issue is affordable childcare. So this has been a national issue, and we think it's very important for women in our community. We know that the ability to go to work and have affordable childcare is very important for women in Palm Beach County. And so we're looking at a variety of things. We're looking at ensuring that we have childcare staff that are able to work in these facilities, ensuring that there are affordable childcare and safe options for children in Palm Beach County, so that mothers and parents can go to work. And it's part of our financial empowerment goal for women in Palm Beach County and across Florida and the US, and even in Israel as well. So those are our 3 main focuses this year. We're in the middle of our grant cycle right now. We have grant applications due in about 2.5 weeks. And so then we'll start our grant process. Our grant committee will begin meeting in the new year, and we will be providing grants to organizations that look at those 3 issues in particular.
On the affordable childcare, so I quit my job when I was pregnant with my 3rd child because my paycheck would have been less than what my childcare bill would have been. So I know that one very, very well. The county commission sits as the childcare licensing and not licensing, but advisory board. And so they set all of the rules and regulations for, I think it's the home childcare. So pay attention to what the commission can do for you on that. It doesn't always have to be a state issue that gets resolved in Tallahassee. There are things we can do on the local level. And the other thing is you really should be pushing. There are a lot of the cities in this county do not have a paid parental leave policy for their employees. We can't mandate that on the private sector, but your local government should be leading by example. And being able to give a mom or a dad that paid time off on maternity leave means that when they do have their child in daycare and that child is sick, they don't have to leave that, I'm guilty of it. I will admit here, there was times I slipped my son Tylenol when I shouldn't have, because if I didn't go to work, I would have been fired because I didn't have the time off to take a sick day. And so anything we can do to help parents not have to make those decisions, you should be pushing all of your city commissions to pass paid parental leave.
You had also mentioned having junior league members come in and fill out a speaker card. Can you share? I think that would be important for our members to understand how that works when it comes to the county commission and how they're able to use their voice in those meetings.
Yeah, so any item, and I think Rochelle, you probably have the same process. Any item that is on the county agenda, outside of the consent agenda, you can fill out a speaker card. Consent agenda items mean they're basically unopposed and we vote. You know, there could be 80 items on the consent agenda and they're passed with one vote. So every item on the agenda, you can put in a speaker card, an individual speaker card, and you can get 3 minutes per item to speak. And so you go into the meeting, you have to fill out that speaker card before the item is called up. And so when the item is under consideration by the board, the mayor will ask if there are any public comments. You know, the person sitting to his left will pull out the comment cards and call your name, and you come up to the podium and you speak for 3 minutes. We don't engage in back and forth. So you don't ask questions, you simply make comments, and you get your 3 minutes. And the most effective way, if it's a really controversial item like that particular zoning, the one for home safe, you don't need all 50 of your members to speak on it. Pick out like 4 or 5 and make sure they've got different points, like organize your comments beforehand. And then if you've got 50 people in there and you have 5 of them speak, you can still have 45 others fill out a speaker card. It would just put non-speaking and mark on there that they are in support of or in opposition to the issue, because it will be called out. You know, Mr. Mayor, we've got 5 speaker cards and 45 non-speaking cards who are opposed to the issue. Or in Emily's case in the legislature, they would call every single one of those names, and then you would the best thing you can do after your few folks have made their points is just stand up and say, I waive in support or I waive in opposition, and that is recorded. And so the people on that committee can see that they've got 50 people in the audience that are in favor or in opposition to an issue.
Go ahead, Rochelle.
To add a little bit to Melissa, since COVID, nobody comes to our meetings. We rarely have anyone coming for any purpose. So even coming like on the issue of childcare or parental leave, to come before and ask the commission to consider it, you know, would be nice, but we don't have anybody who comes to ask us anything in public anymore. And it wasn't big before, unless something major is going down, like a not in my backyard type of issue that Melissa talked about, where then everybody shows up. But on a general meeting, they're the same time every month, nobody comes.
So Holly, you should have one or two of your committee members or your organization members. Every city, every county agenda is posted online. You should have somebody monitoring those.
Thank you. That's great information. I think that's very helpful because a lot of our members have talked about wanting to do more advocacy work, and that's a great information and great. Thank you both for sharing that. Any other questions or comments before we let our elected officials go? We can call them elected officials for 3 more weeks. Is that what it is? Okay. Well, again, thank you all for showing up early this morning. You know, as we celebrate our 20th year, you know, ensuring that Horizon is active and understanding these processes is very important to us. We hope to see everyone next Wednesday at our campaign kickoff at Panache in Ibis. It's on our events calendar on our website, which is joinhorizon.org. So please go on and register to attend. We have lots of events coming up over the next few months. They'll all be posted on our website, and you'll be getting emails about them. Thank you again for attending. This was recorded, so we will be able to send it out to all the members that were able to attend today. And as I said earlier too, we have great materials from the League of Women Voters at the office. So if anyone wants to stop by and pick up some of those materials and read them over before you vote, please feel free to stop by or reach out to me and we can connect. Thank you, Commissioner and Representative. We really, really appreciate you both coming on today and bearing with us through our location change as well. I think we're still figuring out if virtual or in person is better. And I think this worked out easier for everyone. So thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of your day, everyone.
You too. Bye, Dory.